So we have social scripts for a lot of things in our culture. One is social script that you can do is you can go up to a stranger at a bar and ask them out on a date. You might not like that person came up to you and asked you on a date, but it's normal. It's like in the set of things that might happen if you go to
Totally. No one's going home that night being like, you are never going to believe what happened. This was so bizarre.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Phil, I am just genuinely so excited for this conversation and for us to compare notes. We just now came across each other's paths, but we have a lot of similarities and probably some really distinct differences that will emerge as we share stories. So thanks for being here with us.
Yeah, Liz, it's great to be here. Thank you.
So will you give us just the elevator summarized version of the story? How did you come to livenearfriends.com?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. How did you come to Live Near Friends?
So I would love to tell you this was all my idea, but I have to give most of the credit to my wife,
Okay.
whose name is Kristen.
Okay.
And I happen to have fallen in love with a behavioral scientist,
Okay.
professional behavioral scientist. And when that happens, you're not allowed to do things, quote, the normal way. You have to reevaluate and critically think about every aspect of your life design. That's what they do for fun. These behavioral
I am not a
scientists.
behavioral scientist, but my husband told me that he was really relieved when we were done having kids that we never had a set of identical twins. Because he was just like, I just feel like they would have become a social experiment for you.
Yeah.
And I'm just relieved that I didn't have to deal with that level of
You would have named
conflict
them
in our
control
marriage.
and test, right?
100%. I'm like, how are twin parents not utilized? Like, what a gold mine for seeing how humans behave and having that control and variable subject in your own home. Come on.
Yes.
Okay, so you married a behavioral scientist. I love it already.
I fell in love with the behavioral scientist, and we were having the let's move in together conversation. And I thought we would do the thing that most people do who are like living in cities, which is get like a 1-bedroom apartment together.
Sure.
And she said, absolutely not. I've read all the behavioral research, and this is not going to make us happy. We are going to do something else. And we ended up as our like first living situation together, our like move in together moment. We rented a 9-bedroom sort of mansion
Okay.
in Hayes Valley in San Francisco and moved in 9 of our friends.
Okay.
And so this is our move in together moment.
Okay.
And I ended up loving it.
Before you tell us how you loved it, a comment and a question. The comment is, I feel like Kristen brought to the table what I feel like is it feels like a consistent thread with people who end up pursuing this is one or a group of people. There is a level of intentionality that goes into there is a way that things are done. And I'm actually paying attention. Like I am asking the question, which a shockingly small amount of people I feel like actually ask, which is, how is this going for everyone? There is a norm. There is just an absolute, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. And it feels like 98% of the population goes, yep, we do this and we do this. And then there's like the 2% that goes, is this what? How did we get here? Is this, let's look at, and especially in someone like Kristen's position, like the actual science. And I think both of us would probably say it's undeniable. If you do any level of asking the question of how is this going and looking at the data and the science, what you will see is that the answer is the traditional way of whatever, the American way of single family, nuclear. You make 15 different decisions about where you're going to live before you think about who you're going to live next to.
Yes.
Is a big contributor to the place that we're in right now, which is more socially unhealthy than we've ever been in history. But it takes somebody just asking that like really simple question, which I feel like Kristen brought to the table.
Absolutely.
Okay, next up. What was your resistance? I'm assuming that because you weren't the one to go, I'm looking at the data. I'm asking the question of really diving in and going, how are these design decisions actually impacting people on a whole? And what do I want for my life? It was somebody else. Surely there was some level of resistance that you had, some concerns?
Yeah. I think the main concern was like, this seems like a lot of work to put together. Like,
Yeah.
we got to go ask all these people, try to convince them, try to get their times to line up with our times, take on the risk of a big lease in a place.
Totally.
And I think I think what I like just like thinking about it for even a few seconds, what I came to understand is this is actually probably gonna be like one of the highest ROI things I do in my personal life.
Yeah.
And it's every housing decision is a set of trade-offs that you optimize against. And you got to figure out what matters most, what matters second most, what matters third most. And I think what Kristen helped me understand was that there's this habit we have of optimizing against things that I think ultimately don't make people happy. And a lot of this is actually the like tools that we use that give us the framework that we think about these things in, right? So
Say more about that.
If you go on Zillow and you like, what are the things you can like filter on in Zillow?
Right.
You can't filter on who are my neighbors.
Yeah.
You can't filter on what's within a 3-minute walk of me. What can you filter on? You can filter on the size of the home. You can filter on like how recently it was built. And so I think the mental frame our world puts us in around our housing causes us to optimize against the things that are part of that mental frame. And the mental frame that I think Kristen helped me put myself into, and then I subsequently made it my career to help put other people into.
You went all in, as we could say.
Is like your people to a much greater extent than any other part of your home. The people you're near are going to determine the quality of your experience and the quality of your life.
Yep.
And if you're going to work for something, that is the thing to work for. It is not a nicer renovated kitchen. That's actually not going to make you happy. The research says you will habituate to that really quickly, and you'll be just as happy as you were before the kitchen was renovated.
So good.
But
have you heard the statistic that people that see their good friends 3 or more times a week report average life fulfillment and satisfaction increases that's equivalent to a $150,000 a year raise?
Wow, that's wild. Is there anything else like that? Is there any other lever you can pull that gets you that?
No. And just seeing your neighbors, like not good friends, but the other statistic is just being friendly with your neighbors, like regularly interacting and knowing your neighbors is the equivalent to a $75,000 a year bump in just like, how are you doing in life? Significant of an increase.
There's one I've seen in the research that has a downside thing that actually has roughly the same impact.
Tell me more.
Having a really long commute.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, is
okay.
A short commute doesn't make you happy, but a long commute makes you unhappy.
Yeah.
I think it's the equivalent of, I read it as the equivalent of losing like a partner. It's like really intense. How that long commute on people.
Wow. I would say outside of living near friends, designing for that, for a short commute has been, I've never said this out loud, so I want to like gut check that this is true. I feel like that would probably be our second priority, like life design priority. I average about 8 minutes a day in the car. And that like very intentionally making decisions to go, how do we spend less time in the car and more time doing all of the things that we actually believe create long-term happiness. Okay. But you raise a really good point just about like, it is work. I love that you use the word ROI. So that's return on investment. And the reason that I love that phrase is because you're not denying that it's work. Like you're not denying that there is investment that's involved, but you are positing that the return on that investment is probably one of the single greatest things. So we're all spending time and energy doing things. It's like less about trying to make life easy and less work and more about going, if I'm gonna put the hours in, and not just hours, but there is a complexity. You are introducing relational risk, the possibility for rejection, the possibility for conflict. Those are very real costs. But the hypothesis is that actually will, in the end, that return will be very significant and very well worth, comparing that to the stress of, to your example, a kitchen renovation, which is also a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of back and forth, a lot of conversations. I was actually listening to a Marco Polo this morning of a friend who's like the greatest stress in her life right now. It was like a 35-minute Marco Polo about renovations just going awry. And so that is so much time and energy that I think we don't account for because it's normal. Because you get to a certain age, you're midlife, you're American, if you're financially doing well, we all kind of start doing renovations. So what people see us doing is that's so much extra work. I feel like people sometimes underestimate. I'm like, you're doing a lot of work. You're spending a lot of hours making your life work. I don't know that I'm spending any more. It's just different. Yep. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. And I think actually what's at the heart of this is like renovating your kitchen is, I would call it like a social script that we have. Right? It's like, it is normal to buy a home, then a couple years later, make some money and decide that's like the thing you should do next. I think actually the biggest barrier I've seen to people designing their living environment, around who's near them as like a primary consideration, is we don't have social scripts for how we talk to people about this.
Good. Yeah.
And so we have social scripts for a lot of things in our culture. One
Mm-hmm.
is social script that you can do is you can go up to a stranger at a bar and ask them out on a date. You might not like that person came up to you and asked you on a date, but it's normal. It's like in the set of things that might happen if you go to a
Totally.
bar.
No one's going home that night being like, you are never going to believe what happened. This was
Exactly,
so
exactly,
bizarre. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. But asking a friend to live with you or live near you, we don't really have a social script for that. There's not a way in a moment that we have that conversation.
We don't see it represented in media. We don't hear shared stories about it. Yes. Yeah. And so it's less about, I like that it's like identifying how there's like that science around how much positive feedback it takes to outweigh like the emotional weight and energy of negative feedback. So I've heard even with raising your kids, like one piece of criticism, it's going to take 10 pieces of positive affirmation. So they weigh different. I feel like that's what we're talking about. Things in life that feel normal and feel like there's a script, same 10 words, same 10 minutes, whatever it is, same investment. But we don't rightly weigh it in our head because one feels like totally normal. We don't even think about the fact that we're doing it because there's a script or because we've seen it done or we know it's expected. The other might not actually be anymore, but just because it's new.
Yeah.
And that
You,
like
you,
makes
you have
sense.
to write the script and then read the lines versus just read the lines.
Right? Oh, yes. Yeah, that's a great analogy. Okay, so Kristen, you convinced yourself that, listen, it is a lot of work, but I think it's work that's going to create a positive return, if you will. Then you found this house. Who were the 9 people? And what did that conversation look like between you and Kristen? How'd you find those 9 people? How did you introduce the conversation to them? Were they already open to the idea? Were you pitching
Yeah.
the idea along with the invite? Give us like double tap into that.
Different people take different approaches to this. Chris and I wrote a document, like a manifesto,
Okay.
that we called The Obvious Truth.
Oh, I love it.
And the reason we called it that is like you send it to people, and they really like, oh yeah, this is like really obvious. It's really obvious that you should surround yourself with neighbors that you like rather than neighbors that are random and you may not like. So no one's, oh my God, you guys are brilliant. They're like, no, this is really obvious. No shit, Socrates. But the question we started
That should have been
asking
the name of the document.
yeah, totally.
That's the alternative title.
The question we started to ask is, what steps are you taking to design your life around this obvious truth? And will you go on a journey with us where like you're actually going to put effort into designing your life around that truth? And so we started this document. We ended up broken in a handful of close friends.
Was there anything, sorry, I'm going to double tap into the document because I might want to camp out on here because it's a similar moment. We also have a document, but our
What's yours
document is called the Rainbow Rule. And I'll share more about my document, but first I want you to talk more about yours. So was it truly was there any direction? Did it stop with it's better, like kind of the overall pitch for living in community? Or did you all create any sort of vision or manifesto for actually this is how, because there's a million different ways you can live proximately together. Did you outline any vision for that this is specifically how we're going to live together and what the vision for this house and this micro community is?
Yeah, and I'm going to slightly mix the stories of our first community, which is this
Okay.
big house in San Francisco, and where we currently live, which is it's a 10-home compound in Oakland. That's much more oriented around families and having kids. I'm sure we'll talk about this more in a second.
Yep.
So I'm going to mix these stories a little bit, but I think what it takes is you have to define what the container is. You have to define basically a couple of the principles of the container, but you don't over legislate it. You don't like this is the big document of what happens in every single situation. I think is like a bad way of you don't act like lawyers. You want to act like people almost creating like a new set of like values or principles for a company, like a mission statement. And so we have a couple like simple things. I mean, one is just be the best versions of ourselves, support each other. We have an idea called duocracy. So one of the primary considerations when you start to live with people is basically how are you going to govern yourself. And Liz, I'm curious how you guys do this here, but we basically said the way we don't want to govern ourselves is consensus. Consensus sounded like a nightmare.
Yeah.
Like we don't want to be, after a long day at work, sitting in meetings with our friends, discussing things all day long and taking votes. That just sounded like not the way we wanted to be spending time. That felt like heavy to us. And so we're like, how do we cut through all the needs for that stuff? We have a principle called duocracy, which says that everyone here has permission to do the things they think will make the community better. without asking everyone's permission.
Yeah.
And so if you want to buy something, just go buy it. If you want to rearrange the furniture, just go rearrange the furniture. If you want to paint the wall, just go paint the wall. As long as you think it's good, you do it. And as a community, we're going to accept that for every 10 things that happens, you're going to 8 of them, but you're not going to all 10 of them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But we're
I
not
like
going to talk
that.
about it. We're not going to have lots of meetings about it. We're not going to have lots of votes about it. We're not going to, and hopefully that will have more things happen because there's less friction to things happening.
Is there any threshold, like above a certain, I don't know, dollar amount, or like what? And what is that threshold for? Okay, at this point, you do need
$75
consensus.
threshold.
Okay.
Above that, you got to go talk to some people, but not that many things are above $75.
And do you? So I guess my next question is: do you all share finances in some way, or you have some sort of shared community pot that the $75 is coming out of?
Yeah, so we basically have a shared community pot, and so we basically have a food program. So there's a big communal fridge and communal pantry where that always is stocked, and that's most of the pot of money goes to feed that, and then there's money left over for extra things that people spend from.
Okay. Any other, so $75, and then is there any other threshold that it's like we have to be explicit about if it's above this, or is it self-governed because most like emotionally intelligent adults can feel out what's this will dramatically impact your life, and it feels like this is the type of thing that I get group buy-in on.
And people ask about this a lot, and I think people, they think back to maybe the last time they lived in close proximity to people, which maybe was college, where people like weren't like fully formed, like emotionally like adults. Yeah. And they're like, oh, they're thinking their college selves and be like, man, I would have abused this in college. And it's actually like people in their like 30s and 40s just don't tend to do this. Like they're actually like pretty aware people who are like pretty good at just intuitively feeling out like how you should relate to groups and what you should do with groups. And so it's like we generally just find that people just behave and we don't need to actually police these things.
Okay, so I have 2 thoughts.
Yeah.
2 different threads that I want to pull on with this. One, I 100% I think a lot of people's fears is because they are actually pulling from a true lived experience, but then they're putting it in a completely different context. So I did a thing on my Instagram. I was like, what are the things that, you know, would keep you from living this? Or when you see my life, what's your first question of, but what about this? And a huge amount of people were basically like the tension of, I don't want to have to stop and say hi to my neighbors and feel obligated to have conversation every time I leave my house. And I was thinking about it. So we have a little cottage on the property that actually the parents of one of our core community members own. So when they're here, they live in it. And when they're not, they're super generous with it. And we basically collectively get to use it as a little hosting cottage on the property. Cool. And so we had some mutual friends. They're not my close friends, but they're close friends of some other folks. But I know them. We're staying in the property. This was 2 nights ago. And it was probably 9:00 at night. And I run outside to get a quick row in, which makes me sound, that's not a really accurate. I'm not a type. This is new in my life. I'm 2 months into being the type of person that goes to get a quick row in.
I didn't know a quick row was something you could do. That's not on the menu for me.
Which is a machine. And so the machine is outside the little cottage. And so I get on, I have a documentary I'm watching, so I'm really excited. And I have a little clock that's ticking because I want to get inside by 9:30 so I can shower and hang out with my husband and watch our show together. So I got a plan, whatever. So I'm like rowing, and then this gal comes out. She comes out, she sees me rowing because it's outside her back door. And what do I have to do? Because she's a visitor who I know, but we're not in real life together. She lives in Charlotte. I have to take my AirPods out and I have to engage her in a conversation, right? Like, it's just like, I'm a decent human being. Like, I have to do this. So I take my AirPods out. I do actually keep rowing, but at a lower pace. I'm not getting the workout in that I was intending. It's an inconvenience. Now, I will say, at the end of it, it was lovely. My workout, I was really grateful to connect with her. She's a lovely, interesting person. It was great to catch up for the 30 minutes while I rowed. But I was thinking about that compared to my friend Alan, who lives next door. He walks behind me. He does that same path all of the time while I'm rowing. And the amount of times that he stopped to chat and interrupted my rowing is 0. Because the rules are different for it. Like, proximity changes the social rules. How you treat a visitor, how you treat a guest, how you treat family that's in town for 2 days out of the entire year, how you treat a neighbor that you're not in real relationship with is different than how you treat a live near friends friend. And so that's something that I want people to understand is think about the social contract that you have with a spouse or a partner. Like when you walk past them in the hall, do you feel obligated to stop and say, "So Ben, how was your day?" and do this whole little like dance? Like, no. And if the two of you walk past each other and literally don't acknowledge one another, assuming you have a healthy relationship, the story you tell yourself is, they're busy, I'm busy, we're going to see each other 10 minutes down in the living room. It's an entirely different social contract. The point being, I think people do that. They take other relationships and go, but if I had that same contract and it happened to me 6 times a day, that would be totally annoying, totally unsustainable. I would feel completely drained by that. I'm thinking about a situation that I had with a college roommate whose prefrontal cortex was not like fully formed. It's like you have to imagine a completely new social contract that exists when the external environment of how you're deciding to live with friends, that also transforms. So that's something I just want people to think about. Think about the fears that you have and go, oh, but would the rules of that actually really significantly change if I moved into this new environment?
Yes, I really like the social contract point. And I imagine in this thread, you might have gotten some people saying, I can never do that. I'm an introvert.
Yes.
Do you hear that at all? Yeah.
So much.
This is what we hear a lot. So I'm an introvert. My wife's an extrovert. Our community now, where we've 20 adults and 8 kids now living, I'd say more than half the people who live here are introverts.
Same.
And the really surprising thing, I'm guessing you're an extrovert, Liz. The really surprising thing is the introverts like it better than the extroverts.
Say more.
They, like you said, the social contract changes. You don't have to have a conversation with everyone you walk by who you live near every single time. And it's much more comfortable to be with people you have a really familiar routine with than going to a cocktail party is terrifying if you're an introvert because you have to you're expected to be on. You're not expected to be on with the people you live near.
No.
Whereas the extroverts actually sometimes struggle because they're like, I'm an extrovert. I have to talk to everyone around me. And they find that they tire themselves out.
Oh, interesting. So it's like they're more like it's less obligatory, more I'm a kid in a candy shop. So I choose to engage.
Yeah.
And then I find myself on the other side being like, wow, that was a lot. Yeah, I think we're about half and half. I would probably say introvert, extrovert. I consider myself I'm an ambivert in the sense that it's like, I don't feel very strongly. I really need alone time. My husband's more extroverted than I am. But again, it's like these social rules. Like during the winter, my husband loves to play games after we put the kids down in our house on like a weeknight. And that's just not my jam, man. I'm like, I want to be by myself in my bed in my silk pajamas reading a book. That is my recharge. But the social contract, like if you have friends over and your wife never comes downstairs, people are, what's going on here? Is she fine? There's questions that get asked. It feels rude. Is it something about us? The social contract for us is like, everybody knows Liz is upstairs in her pajamas reading a book. This just happens to be. And now, if I were doing that every time the group gathered, of course, like there would be a certain level of me pulling away to get my introvert time that obviously people would probably start to ask questions. But there's unimaginable situations for if you're thinking about putting your lens of hosting your friends at your house that do not apply when you live near your friends. I was in the backyard the other day reading a book. And my neighbor was out on his deck reading a book. We were both like 12 feet away from each other reading a book for 45 minutes. And one of us eventually got up and went inside. Not a single word was exchanged because the understanding is I'm outside to read a book. But to your point, we're like emotionally intelligent adults that even introverts versus extroverts, I think all of us do have maybe slightly differing proportions. But every healthy, mature adult has a need for meaningful social interaction and time alone where you don't feel a sense of social obligation. We actually all need both of those things. So it's bizarre to me that people assume like the other people in your life want a life where every single time they see another adult, even if that's 8 or 10 times a day, to stop and chat. Who do you know that also wants that? You're actually everybody. So it was interesting to have my DMs flooded with all of these people that were like, here's my fear. And I'm going, everybody has the same fear, which means you don't have to be afraid of it because we're all going to regulate to get our own needs and desires met. And there might be slight differences.
People also maybe think in their head like of the most annoying person in their office. And it's like, you just don't have to live with that person.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about this. Two more threads. Oh my gosh. I'm going to have a hard time landing the plane. We could talk for a long time. Okay. A more serious thread that I would love your thoughts on. We have referenced probably a dozen times in the last 30 minutes. Emotionally intelligent, like fully formed adults, we kind of self regulate. So let's talk about folks who struggle. Let's go to let's say like folks who have mental illness and are like not what we would say. They are pretty far from I operate as a normal, pretty emotionally, or maybe not even a form of mental illness, maybe just like extraordinarily like low IQ. Because we also all know people like that. Have you seen the movie Friendship yet?
No.
Oh, you got to see it. It's called Friendship. No spoiler alerts, but this really brought up a bunch of questions for me, like existentially about, but what about the people that nobody wants to be around? Like, what about the people that just like either struggle with mental illness that inhibits their social interactions from being healthy or are just extraordinarily low on the EQ?
Yeah.
Talk about that. What are your thoughts? Has this come up for you? Are you like, how do you respond to that?
So I think you need to think about what is the institution that is going to make everyone in a society feel like they're part of the collective in some way. And it may not be that person is your roommate or your housemate, but if you think of institutions like churches, or I think there's different like scales of institutions of human collectives that like exist. So there's the individual, which has gotten a lot of focus recently. And there's like government, which is like our biggest form of collective.
Yeah.
And then there's all these like different things up and down the chain. And so I think what like we're describing when we talk about our living situations is like a small tribe of people like living together and sharing life together. There's like bigger collectives, which are things like churches and community groups and stuff like that, which are larger. So I live with 20 people, which is a very large version of the thing.
Yeah.
Most people will live just like next to a friend or next to a family member. There might be 2 people or 4 people. I think when we think about all the diversity of people, it's like you need to think about the size of structure that can absorb them effectively. And it might be that, and I think an issue in like Bowling Alone, I don't know if you've read Bowling Alone or seen the documentary, is like basically all about this like hollowing out of the community level
the clubs,
the clubs and the the entities large enough to absorb a lot of people with a lot of different things happening for them. And so I think what we're talking about is actually something that's like a little sub that in scale, right? We're talking about just a couple people who like want to share life together, like sharing life together. It's much more akin to a friend group or like an immediate family. I think of it as to a social institution, and I think what you're describing is something that it's like how does a social institution take a diversity of people in? I don't know if that's a good answer, but
no, I think it is. I have one friend in particular who I feel like challenges me on this. It's out of love, and she's a fellow Enneagram 8, so I love it. I love the intellectual stimulation, but it really does come down to this kind of question of, but diversity. And I recently, and this feels vulnerable to say on the internet, but one of the things that I said, I was like, I love, first of all, just like rightly placing, there are so many different social groups of different sizes and different missions and different capacities. And we could dive in more to just like the actual like one-on-one relationships in your community versus ours. I would say mine feels closest to marriage. And I say that for what it's worth. We're all in monogamous traditional marriages. So I don't mean in any sort of romantic or sexual way at all. But it's the intimacy of these relationships. These are the people that will be around my kids when I'm not around, that I'm sharing property with, that I'm sharing finances with, that for me in our community, that I am sharing my most intimate, vulnerable, authentic, like I share the full story of my life with these people, and I give them authority to speak into my life and to really fully know me. So for me, that's the closest to either nuclear family, but for a lot of people, it's even closer than nuclear family into like marriage. And what I was sharing with my friend is I was like, you know what? When I decided who I was going to marry, diversity was not my number one value. Actually, similarity was. And not similarity in personalities or proclivities. Like, I feel like there's a lot of room. But when it came to, I remember like thinking about who I was going to marry and being like, imagining what is the life he would build without me? What are his core values? What is the life he will build without me? And is that a life that I would want? Could I get on board? Could I get excited? And which to me really meant like, is that the same as I was looking for similarity. Like I want to marry somebody who without my influence would build a life that I would look at and go, that's a life that I want. And so I was like, I wasn't looking for somebody that had some sort of like
Yeah.
completely different experience or some completely different view of success. And
You know,
so,
imagine a good partner is both. I agree with you. I look at the same thing. They're similar in a lot of ways, but actually, a good partner is usually actually complementary and
true.
different in
On
other
the
ways. It's
micro
actually,
level. So, like
yeah,
values, I was looking for
yes,
almost complete alignment. Like, I didn't have a lot of space for core values to be different. So let's take the life building thing. Okay, whatever. I'm the engineer that makes up the plans and you're the painter that makes it beautiful. That type of diversity in partnership. But like we agreed symbolically on the type of house that we wanted to build. Our skills and our proclivities within that, I felt oftentimes it's to your point, even better if it's complementary and not the same. But it was like, I didn't want to battle what type of house we were going to build. I wanted a partner who was like, that excites me too. And I do feel that way about this proximate and intimate of community of I don't want to be arguing about core values. I do want to know that we've got a vision for what a beautiful, good, successful life is. And then we're all bringing very different tools and proclivities and personalities to the mix to build the thing. But that sounds exhausting. If we're like, every time we're making a decision, we go back to arguing about what type of house we're going to build.
totally.
Would you agree?
I think I do agree with this. I think actually it's very well said. And maybe to add on a bit, the relationship I have with the people that live with me at Radish, we actually have a term for it that we borrowed from a professor named Eli Finkel, who we call ourselves other significant others.
I read that. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So that's our WhatsApp chat is OSOs.
I love it.
And I want to talk about actually what we mean by this and what we don't mean by this. So
Yeah.
the people that live with that Radish are not necessarily my best friends. They're like not the people I would necessarily like invite to stay at my bachelor party if I was having one.
Okay. Okay.
Like, yeah, maybe some, but what they are is they are my local support structure.
Yep.
It is a different relationship, and it's a relationship that I think a lot of people are missing. If you think about the different roles people play in their lives, you have your best friend. You call up your best friend when you're having like some real issues, and you talk to them. They don't have to live in your same city. You're still going to give them a call. But what your local support structure is, if you have your appendix burst, which somebody Radish had happen a couple months ago,
Oh gosh.
and you need someone to drive you to the hospital, that's what your local support structure does. You're not calling your best friend across town.
Yeah.
And you don't need to be best friends with the person that's going to drive you there. They're just a group of people who have decided you're mutually going to take care of each other.
That's so
And
good.
take care of each other's like needs. And so let's look at an OSO as to us.
That is another point of difference that I'm interested in exploring with you.
You have a different view on that?
I actually think your take on it, I think it's a more valuable starting point for people to say, don't look for your best friend. It's to me, it feels like we're getting into like soulmate territory. I just think the soulmate ideology is stupid. Like it's unhelpful.
People for making this happen because like they're waiting for their soulmate. My soulmate's
Totally.
not ready. I can't do this. It's like you don't need your soulmate. I've lived with over 100 people. We've done 3 communities now, so I've lived with a lot of
Okay.
people. Like almost every single one of those 100 people, I would totally live with again. It actually does not need to be a super special person. It just needs to be someone who has basically the same goal as you, which is we're going to create a cool life together, and we're gonna support each other in the small ways.
Totally.
And neighbors support each other, and that's all it needs to be successful.
Yeah. And I think that sets up everyone for so much more success because what also happens the moment you define it like that is the expectations that we have. I think the same thing happens in friendship that happens in romantic relationships. Like we have put such a focus on the one relationship of your partner who is supposed to be your rock and you're like stable person and you're like steady force through the storms and you're like adventure person who's constantly like intellectually stimulating you and stimulating you in other ways and it's just like that can't be the same person. Like the person that is your steady Eddie can't also be your like driver of excitement and new experiences and the person. And I think it's one of the drivers as to why the institution of marriage at this point is like a coin toss at this point, whether or not it's working for people, because I think what we expect.
All or nothing marriage. It's like you're
totally.
Me or we can't be together.
Totally. And I think sometimes we do the same thing with friends. I will find somebody. I will find a best friend someday that is this and this and this and this. And we carry into that relationship an enormous amount of expectation. And it is not long before we feel left down. We feel disappointed, we feel resentful because they're not able to fulfill that. And so I think the bar of starting with they just have to be a good neighbor, like and a decent person where there is mutual concern for one another is, and that can be a success. I did a, so you started more with community and let's be good neighbors to each other. If relationships, which I imagine out of those 100 people, how many would you now say are your best friends?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say a decent number. Like at this point, a decent number are very close to me. That happened over a long period of time, though. Like
Okay.
we've been living
Yeah.
in our current place for 7 years. Yeah, and those relationships evolve and they get closer for sure. And I think especially as we've had kids, so we've had 8
Yeah.
in our current community be born, and it's like you get very close to the other parents.
How many kids did you say?
8.
Okay.
Yeah, it's my girl and 7 boys.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's amazing. I do live next door to my best friends. And I would say they were largely, I joke that it was like half of my best friends who I'm living in proximity with were arranged marriages, though, in the sense that I didn't go out and hand select, like, you would be my best friend. But it was like the act of doing life so
Yes.
closely together created best friends. Now, there's a couple that I would just say we had chemistry. Like, we get along, we laugh at the same things. And it's just like we would have been besties. I think we could be across town or across country besties. But there are a couple of my best friends that I would be like, I don't think I would have chosen you. But the practices that we engaged in, and it's the science around like smiling, how we're like, we think emotions trigger the muscles in your face to smile, and then that's the whole story. And it's actually, oh, but when you smile and you don't feel happy, the muscle, there's a reverse sense of it. Like the actual muscle action then triggers the neurochemicals that go, we're happy. And I think not always, and I even hesitate to say this, and maybe I'll edit it out, because I think your theory is the stronger theory, but I feel the need to also share just out of a diversity of, a couple of them were my best friends. And then we actually did decide to live proximate together. So by the time we moved in together, it was that sense of I get to see my best friends every day. So it is a different manifestation.
What was the conversation like? Getting back to maybe the earlier part of the discussion where you asked you need to develop this social script around like, will you be my neighbor? Like, how did you go about doing that?
Yeah. So my husband and I moved to Portland, Oregon in 2011 and had no friends, no family. We truly were like starting from scratch. And so we met a couple through friends of friends, like acquaintances, one of the whatever happy hour that nobody wants to go to. It's horrible. So for us, we met this couple, and I joke very openly that I'm like, they weren't my favorite. I was kind of like, they're fine, but they're a little this or a little that, whatever story you tell yourself. But for me, the two things we had a lot, like a handful of core values. It was like very quickly, we have some core beliefs that we hold in common and core values. And then I say the second, but arguably most important thing that we found out about them is they also didn't have any friends. So they were building a life from scratch in Portland as well. And it actually for us started with kind of a joke that we were like, we're losers in this new city together and we want to find our Cheers bar.
Yes.
Let's find a Cheers bar together. So very low stakes. Like we did not start with let's move in. So it literally started with let's hang out every Wednesday and hop around the city and try to find the pub that's going to become like our pub. And then that turned into, so then we found the pub, right? And so the stakes, there was consistency and commitment because from the get-go, we were like, let's hang out once a week. Neither of us have any other friends. Let's have something consistent so we're not doing let's get together. And then 8 weeks pass and we haven't seen each other and we can't find a time. So we started with a lot of commitment and consistency, but still really low stakes. And then the stakes got ratcheted up specifically with that time. With the Wednesday night, we were like, okay, we found our Cheers bar where we can throw darts and play beer. Let's actually be really intentional about how we're using these 2 or 3 hours a week in conversation, in the sense of let's go deep. Let's share the full story of our lives. Like, where did you come from? What are your greatest joys? What are your greatest heartbreaks? Which then very naturally led to what's your current challenges? What are your current joys? How can we help? How can we share? And really from the early stages, transparency, authenticity, and I would say reconciliation is the word that I would use, or like a commitment to rupture and repair in relationship. This sense that if we get this close and we are really sharing, the full story of our lives, it isn't an if, it's a when we experience some sort of rupture. When you say something that just really rubbed me the wrong way or made me feel dismissed or diminished or not acknowledged or disrespected, whatever it is, or I thought you were going to say something and you didn't, and I feel disappointed. So from a very early time in the relationship, I would say those were some of our core values: transparency, authenticity, and just like relational repair and like staying right with one another. And then we slowly started inviting other people to these Wednesday nights. So for us, for a long time, it was just a small but growing, but very contained. Like it was never meant to be a group of 12 people. It was kind of like my vision was this will never be more than 5 or 6 people, because I have a pretty strong belief around how big a group can get before it ceases to be able to be a space of complete transparency and authenticity. But it truly was like a Wednesday night group, not a proximate thing. And then for us, the first move into proximity was we did all live within like bike riding distance of each other, a couple miles. And then a couple years in, the apartment next door to that very first couple opened up. And we lived like 8 blocks away in a really cute apartment right across the street from Whole Foods. It was like very ideal for us. It worked really well for us. And we moved to a crappier apartment where the rent was a little bit more, but the sole purpose and all the hassle to get 8 blocks away, like we were in the same neighborhood, but because we were like, we have a hunch that the difference between 8 blocks and next door is really significant. And so we moved in.
Was that trade-off worth it?
Not only was it worth it, that changed the entire trajectory. If the hypothesis was we think 8 blocks makes a difference, the result of that experiment was it changes everything. Like it changes everything. Like how the relationships, how much you can rely on one another, how often you see one another without scheduling, all of those things led us to, at the end of that experiment, going, it's bananas. Like, why would you not live next door to friends?
We have 2 terms for this distance. I'm glad you're bringing this up. This is crucial that people understand this. So, like, how close is close? And I'm like, we have 2 distances we talk about. One is Crocs distance.
Okay.
So, will you throw on Crocs and walk over without socks?
Yep.
It's basically, you need to think about it, or you're just like, I'm going to go over. It doesn't. I don't need a plan. I'm just going to walk over.
Yep.
The other distance we think about is baby monitor distance.
That's ours. Same phrase. Yeah,
you
totally.
use the same one. Okay.
Yep.
Which is basically, can you leave your kid sleeping?
Yep.
And hand your neighbor the baby monitor, and they're that close that they can just, you're confident everything's gonna be okay.
We didn't have kids at that point, but as we designed 2.0, which was like places to buy and live more permanently, our number one phrase that we used, even pre-kids, we knew baby monitor distance would change everything. And now I will say so the structure, I watched a video, so I know the whole structure of your compound. Our compound we started with a single family home that was like pretty dilapidated, that we worked with the developer who had already bought the home and had plans to demolish it. And we built 3 skinny homes. So 3 separate lots, 3 separate mortgages. But then we took down, we were like, bro, you don't need to build the fences. We're going to take them down. And he was so weirded out by it. I'm building the fences. If you take them down after I'm done. But we were like, just please don't build the fence. It's just a way. I'm building the fences. So there were fences. And now, so it started with 3 kind of townhome things with a shared backyard. And we've since accumulated 2 adjacent properties. So we've got an L of 5 single family homes, all on like their own legal lots. There's no actual shared property. And then there's a duplex that's about 4 blocks down. And then there's 2 other single family homes that are within a mile. The difference between, so there are 7 houses in baby monitor distance and 2 that are not. Very significant difference. They're still beloved core members of our community, but the relationship that we have with baby monitor distance folks versus less than 1 mile away is really significant. And I would say, it would be interesting to measure it, but I see these folks by a factor of 1,000% more than I do. There is still a level of intentionality that's required at a mile away that does not exist at baby monitor distance.
Yes.
And it really
there's an
changes.
Investment in going a mile. You need to think about what's the weather? Am I dressed right? At baby monitor distance, you don't need to think about that.
No. And let's talk about it, because I think we share this, that it's like a huge portion of our adult life. And I'm putting words in your mouth, so of course feel free to disagree, but like a lot of my social health time comes from after I put my kids to bed.
Yes.
A huge amount of like actual adult. Now, there's tons of beautiful, I shouldn't say that because there's a lot of shared life that happens with the kids that is just as important for a different reason. But like face to face, we're adults, we're in deep conversation, and we're sharing ideas, we're sharing about our lives. Vast majority of that for me happens after 8 p.m. without a babysitter in my backyard. And
I don't think people, I'm sure you have a lot of audience who doesn't have kids yet. I didn't understand this until I had kids, how crucial
totally,
what you just said is. Because I didn't
yes.
actually understand like the rhythm. Could you actually explain so people can really get this, like how much your life changes if you can have dinner with friends without a babysitter? Like what that actually means?
It's just, I can't think on every level. So, finances. There's no financial burden to hanging out with your friends. And what Phil and I, when we say baby monitor distance, is I can put my kids to bed, I can take the monitor, and I can go out back or I can go 4 doors down, and I am within the physical distance that I can check in on my child on a baby monitor. And if anything happens, be back in under a minute to support your kid if you need it, which is why you don't have to hire the babysitter. So there's the financial aspect of it. There's just the scheduling, like removing the friction of what day of the week are people available and can find babysitters. I would say takes the likelihood that you're going to hang out with your friends. I'm just making up numbers here, but it feels like 100%, no, more than that, 100 times less likely, more friction. Maybe that's how I would phrase it. 100 times more friction goes into that. I also think that there's something about hanging out with your friends for 30 minutes, 5 nights a week or 3 nights a week versus the pressure that gets put on. Okay, it's mom's night out. Once every 2 months, we're out with the girls and we've got what ends up actually only being 2.5 hours out. But the small interactions that actually really add up over time. And there's just like no pressure on those interactions. So it's like some nights you sit in the backyard and it's boring and you like shoot the shit. And then eventually somebody gets up and goes in their house and it's the end. And then every once in a while, it's those like long, beautiful, in depth. But the fact that you're not planning for those things, and also there's not pressure to have those things because you just are so confident that it's like, we get our reps in. Like we've designed our life so that the reps are actually not just possible, but frankly, inevitable. And I know we've both done a lot of work on our properties to just create outdoor shared spaces where those kind of get the fire pit. For us, we've got 3 covered dining areas, a hot tub, a like kind of fire pit area. So designing for those spaces where those like more organic interactions take place. But I remember joining a Facebook group when I first became a mom. That was like a mom's group. And I was shook how miserable new moms are. Like, and also there's like this martyrdom thing that exists in like America. Like, I remember reading through this thread where moms were basically comparing how long it had been since they'd had a night out with their friends. Of just, and there was almost some kind of, I don't know what it was. Look at me. I'm like an amazing mom. I haven't left my children for 2 years, or they hated their husbands because they hadn't been out with their girl, whatever it was. And I just remember being like, I went on maternity leave with my 2 best friends on either side. And you can't plan this, but I had my second kid. They had their first kids all within the same 2 months. And like, for the fabric of my maternity leave was like lazy mornings, waking up. We're all in the backyard. I'm going to go take a shower. Great. The babies are laying on a blanket. You go take a shower. I'll read a book next to the babies. You go and near constant adult interaction during a time that is so we're sleep deprived. Our nipples are cracking and bleeding. We're sharing. I literally remember being in the backyard and being like, having a friend like reposition my baby's head on my boob to be like, I don't know, I've tried this. Is this working? And just thinking to have that moment alone, like my husband's at work. I am alone in a home with a baby who's not eating. And I like just my cortisol spikes just even thinking about that. And that exact same experience with your best friends is like one of the sweetest times of my whole life. And I loved it. And not to say, obviously, sleep deprivation is hard even when you have friends. But it wasn't a very hard season of life. It was like a lovely season of life, which you almost even feel bad saying.
Totally.
Because you're like, it doesn't have to be this
I
hard.
wrote this once in a blog post. I'm like, I feel like an asshole saying this, but it was really not as hard as people made it out to be. And I think it's like a lot, basically, It comes down to design. I made a tweet a couple days ago, which a lot of people seem to relate to, which was I think the fertility rate in my friend group is probably double what it would be if we
Yeah.
didn't all live next to each other. And
Second.
we have two kids. My wife and I agreed when we got married that we were going to have 0 or 1 kids. And then now we have 2 kids. And I'm pretty sure we would not have 2 kids if we didn't live here. And then I've basically seen all our friends have kids earlier than they would have them, have more than they would have. And it's because, just like anything else, if it's like something's really hard, you're not going to do it. And it just makes having kids much, much easier.
I really second that. I think our friend group, we were the first to have a third. So we're like, our average is 3 in our community. We have a couple that have 2, none that only have 1. But I would say half of the families came in going 2 is enough and then went, you know what? Let's try for a third. Because, like, also, not only is it not as hard when you're living in community with kids, that becomes part of the fun. It's just like the built-in. And listen, our kids aren't old enough. This will become more challenging and complex. So I do acknowledge that. Our oldest is 9. There's a 10-year-old that lives down the block. So we're just getting into what I think will be a season where it's a little bit trickier and stickier with like middle schoolers or teenagers. But at the phase that they're little kids, and I think I would say this, and I haven't lived my full life to be able to say this unequivocally, my gut is that if you had to choose a season of life to index on living with friends, that infancy to 8 or 9 would be your highest ROI. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, our oldest kid here is 3.5. So we have 8 kids between 0 and 3.5. They're actually really clustered. So we don't know what the future holds. I'm actually curious a little bit more from you. But it's my little girl last night, basically. She leaves our house, goes over to look one of the windows.
I saw
the window, demands a popsicle, gets the popsicle from one person, then goes to the place where somebody's cooking food, sits down like at the bar stool, and is, what's that? Can I taste? Basically gets like an omakase meal from whoever's cooking. And it's like, where's Ray? She's had this
She's lived a whole good life.
Yeah, and like she knows how to now manipulate all the adults, not just, me.
But I think what you just brought up was actually, I think it's twofold. If my thesis is highest ROI, because when you're single or married without kids, you have a lot more mobility and you just have a lot more, like it's still a bummer to have to drive 25 minutes to meet your friends. And it still won't happen as much as it needs to happen for you to be socially healthy unless you're really intentional about it. And the massive barrier of childcare and having kids and are their kids the same age as you don't have. So it's a little bit easier. And then I think when our kids get older, there's just a whole different social dynamic. Like, who are they friends with at school? And our family will probably start pursuing those families a little bit more and will be more mobile and more flexible. But during the infancy to, I don't know, mid-grade school, not only do I think for the parents, I think that's the most isolating time where take a severe dip in our social health because of how hard it is to actually just be with our people and because of how stressful. It's 2 things are happening at once. It gets way harder to see your friends, and you are in a survival season where practical help and like support is probably more valuable than it is in other seasons of your life. So for the parents' health, I think number 1 ROI is this season of life that we're both in. But for the children, we think about like how much development is happening 0 to 3, 0 to 5, so much of how our kids will see the world, their formation, what they think is normal, how attached or safe they feel is happening in those 0 to 5 years. And so the fact that like our children, their worldview is I am safe, I am loved, I am seen, and I am cared for, not just by 2 adults, but by, in your case, 20 or on the kids that my kids see on a daily basis is really us, our 3 families. But neurologically, I would love to do a brain scan of our children of just like how safe and attached they feel. And again, not just to their 2 primary caregivers, which I think I experience is it's not the same. Like how our kids feel about Uncle Alan or Uncle Jimmy or Auntie Blair is not the same as how they feel about mom and dad. There's a very unique, special bond. And we definitely have the largest influence in our child's life than our neighbors do. But the fact that their immediate world is not only safe and secure, but also, and I'm indexing a lot on this, raising 3 boys. I'm like, I handpicked the grown men that you will see on a daily basis
Mm.
are a version of who I want you to be in the world. Like they have integrity, they are faithful, they are equal parents, they are hard workers, they are responsible, they care for the collective. There's part of me that's, I think 90% of my parenting, like, just came from who I decided that my boys were going to see. Is this is what, when we associate being a man and like growing up, this is our view of normal, like how incredibly formative that is beyond like me running my mouth about what it means to be a good man. My strategy has been, I'm just going to surround you by good men, and that's going to become your normal.
What an honor to your friends to be the people that you've chosen to do that with.
Mm.
That was feel really special.
I cry when I talk about it with them.
Yeah.
It's just like how, and I know that they feel the same way about me. So yes, to your point of just, there is a deep sense of just, I don't know, collective, yeah, like honor and responsibility that goes into being that. And it's so cool that it's like they're all really different personalities too, which I love. That creates some kind of diversity for my kids of what it means to be a good person. Also can look really different. You can have different hobbies and interests and personalities. And it gives them, I think, just more imagination for what being a good human and adult looks like. Okay, so we're only in the beginning. And maybe we should have a secondary.
I'm enjoying this.